Welcome to the world awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
Hi there, I'm your host of The World Awaits, Kirsty Bedford. Welcome to our summer series and Happy New Year. I hope you've had an incredible start to the new year. This week, we're giving you an insight into life as a digital nomad, starting with authors, writers, digital creators and husbands, Brent Hartinger and Michael Jensen, who've lived in more than 30 countries and travelled to more than 60. The long-time digital nomads have no plans to return to their home in the US, particularly now with Trump at the helm, so they say, and they share their insights into what it's like living a nomadic life with top tips on how you can do it too. Welcome to the show, Michael and Brent.
Thank you, Kirsty. We're very happy to be here with you. I'm Brent. And I'm Michael.
It's so great to have you on The World Away. So, let's kick off by just start us a bit about what made you want to leave the US and live a nomadic life.
Well, okay, so we literally made the decision to leave the night Donald Trump was elected in 2016. And we were driving home from a very depressing election party. And I turned to Michael and I said, why don't we just leave the country? And he thought about it for about 3 seconds. And he said, okay. But the longer story is we've been talking about doing this for a long time, about traveling long term. But looking back now, I seriously wonder if that hadn't happened, if Donald Trump hadn't been elected, would we have always sort of dreamed about it and never made the push? So as horrible as that was, maybe it ended up being a good thing for us, ironically, a silver lining, because it's honestly the best decision we ever made.
I'd lived overseas before. I'd actually finished high school in Australia, and then I went back after I graduated from university, and I worked at the Brisbane Expo, and I hitchhiked up and down the whole eastern seaboard. So when he asked me if I wanted to leave the country, he's not kidding. It took me about 3 seconds to say, yes, I want to go leave and see the rest of the world again.
That's amazing. And that was obviously the first time Trump was elected. Were you considering going back? And then when he was re-elected, did you decide no? Or was it already, your plans were already long term?
No, we decided to give this a year. When we started, we'd never heard the term digital nomad, long-term travel. We had no idea that this was a lifestyle. We decided to give it a year. We were just a couple months into it, living in Miami, which was our first stop. And we looked at each other and we said, this is great. We really like this. I don't think we're going to be going back anytime soon. So
the big, I think, mistake we made, and that most people make looking at our lives, we thought of it being like on holiday, being on vacation. And we thought it would be really expensive. We thought it would be really stressful. And even now, people look at our life and the only peg they can hang it on is being on holiday. But what we do is very different than being on holiday because we call ourselves slow mads. We travel slowly and we tend to stay someplace anywhere between 1 and 3 months. And ironically, because we lived in America, which is so darn expensive compared to the rest of the world, our cost of living is much cheaper than it was. So it's really very different than being on holiday. And it's hard to explain that to people until you actually do it. It's less stressful and it's cheaper.
Yes, that's a really good point. So tell us how many countries you visited so far and where you are now, what you're doing now. 2 questions in one.
We're not really country counters, so I can't tell you exactly how many, but I think it's somewhere in the low 60s. I think that's how many countries we've lived in. 30 plus countries, and another 30 countries we've been through for a certain amount of time. We are currently in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, which is in central Mexico. We've been here almost 2.5 months, and we leave a week from today to continue on to the second half of the year.
Great. And where are you headed to next?
So we're going to be in Seattle for 2 weeks, which is our hometown, visiting friends and family. And then we hop on a plane to Seoul, Korea. And we're in Seoul, Korea for a week. And then we are going to Taiwan for 1 to 3 months. And then we're going to Hong Kong for 2 weeks, doing a 10-day tour of China, and then finishing up the year in Japan.
The one part about our lifestyle that we do feel guilty about is the carbon footprint. So we generally try to stay in one area of the world for an entire year. And if we're in Europe, then that means we can do ground transportation. Since we're going to be in Asia, we're going to do more flying than usual. But we try to minimize as much as possible. That's the flaw in what we do, the carbon footprint.
Yes. And a challenging one. And So, although obviously there's experiences in other ways you can give back when you are traveling, which I'm sure you do too. So what country or region or place that you've been to has surprised you the most?
Gosh, I mean, it's the places that we don't have big expectations for. Like we spent a lot of time in Central and Eastern Europe, and we had stereotypes from, the Soviet Union and really vague impressions because they're not really well-known travel destinations. At least they weren't, especially, 7 years ago. And so that has been delightful. And in general, I think that's true. I think the places we most like to visit are not the big tourist hotspots, in part because there are no hordes of people. I mean, that's always nice, but also just because you don't know what to expect. And the big thing, I think the biggest surprise has been how nice people are all over the world. People are so generous and open, especially, again, our life is different from being a tourist. You go outside the tourist hotspots, which is where we tend to live, and people are so grateful and, happy that you've come to visit their community, and they're so willing to meet you and welcome you into their place. And that's just been wonderful. It's, leaving the country, Trump gets elected and my view of America gets really low. Then we travel around the world and my view of humanity has really increased because people are just so open and generous and kind and wonderful.
I think in terms of location, Brent touched on Eastern Europe and being children of the Cold War that was behind the Iron Curtain. And I had this certain stereotype. I focused on the Eastern Europe part, that it's going to be run down and lots of factories and not very nice. And I forgot the Europe part. And what we realized when we started spending time in Eastern Europe is it's Europe. It is wonderful old towns, and it is, fantastic plazas and beautiful castles. And I mean, it's Europe. And so that part of it was really wonderful. It's just much less expensive and crowded.
Yes, yes. And so, where are you, when you're living in certain places? What are you doing? Are you house sitting, or are you hiring Airbnbs? Where are you staying?
It's a combination of things. We sometimes rent through Airbnb. Oftentimes we'll rent a month and then we'll make a deal, with the owner to continue living. That's what we often do. We've met so many people now that sort of opportunities and circumstances arise. I said when we left Seattle, I said to Michael, well, we need to bring a jacket because we're going to be invited to live in the villa of some European prince. And that has yet to happen. But we have had all kinds of weird opportunities where people say, oh, come live with me in my guest house, or would you mind house sitting, or, let's travel together. And so it's half the time we rent traditionally, and half the time some weird circumstance arises. And the more people you know, then the more people you meet. And it just goes on and on and on. And that's been wonderful too.
And pre-COVID, we did a lot of something called co-living, which is what a lot of digital nomads do. You have your own private, bedroom and bathroom, but then you share workspace and kitchen space. COVID really threw a wrench in all of that. And we haven't actually gone back to that. We keep saying we're going to, but we haven't quite got back to it. I know a lot of businesses went under during COVID. So hopefully we'll eventually get that back into the mix.
Co-living is it's like an upscale hostel, long-term hostel, where everybody has their own small personal space and then like a shared kitchen. And it's just a wonderful way to meet people who are also looking to meet people. We met lots of wonderful friends that way.
And slightly different to this grand, almost palace-like house that I can see in the background that you're saying now, that you did tell me has an intercom from one of the levels to the other.
Yeah, these were my friends that invited us to sort of, we've got a cheap rent, so we're sort of house sitting and renting. But it's just it's a palatial mansion. But it's fun to be here for a couple of months. Why not?
But not our style long term. I would never buy a place this big.
Yeah.
So where's somewhere that you would never go back to?
Well, that's easy for me to answer, and that would be Serbia. That is a country in Eastern Europe for folks who don't know. And I never connected with the people there. We had just come from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and for those who don't know, they were involved in a war in the late 90s, early aughts when Yugoslavia was breaking up. And there was a lot of conflict between the two countries. And I found the Bosnian attitude. Bosnians in Sarajevo, we were mostly Muslim. In Serbia, they were mostly Orthodox Christians. And I found the Bosnians to have a great attitude about the war. And I found the Serbians to have a big chip on their shoulder, that left a bad taste in my mouth. So I don't really want to go back to Serbia.
Honestly, we disagree slightly on this. We were in part of Serbia that was sort of an autonomous region called Novi Sad, so the artsy part of the country. I think is true literally everywhere we have been. There's something we love and something we don't like. And so it's like people say, what's your favorite country? And I mean, I love Thailand and I love Italy and I love Mexico. But everywhere we have been, I know it sounds, I don't know, anodyne or something. It sounds Pollyanna-ish. Everywhere we've been, there has been something truly wonderful. And there's also been something truly annoying. So it's like, I guess it's not all equally good, but everything has been an adventure. And then so much of it has been, it's really not about the location. It's about the friends we meet. And we made just these wonderful friends all over the world. And so when I think of places, I think of, sharing Tbilisi, Georgia with Casey and Gillian, or living in Mexico City with Tyler, or wherever we were. And then it becomes, it's just all a wonderful blur. I hate to sound quite so positive about everything, but I've totally drunk the nomad Kool-Aid.
And also, because did you find any challenges, traveling as a couple? Like, is that something that you've had to, or is it just not something that comes up? Is it just not?
You mean as a gay couple?
Yes.
No, it really has not been an issue. I can hardly think of any instances. And that comes from a place of great privilege, because as Westerners who are perceived as being, relatively well off and able to do and travel this lifestyle, when we go to places, they're going to want our tourist dollars. So they have a vested interest in being welcoming and not caring that we're a gay couple. Then I would add to that most people, they just want to live their life. They don't care who you are, what your sexuality is. If you're not making it an overt issue, then they don't have a reason to make it an overt issue.
Well, we're also mindful of local mores, and we are, I guess, quote unquote, discreet. In terms of being a couple, we have a lot of nomad friends who are single, and there are real challenges. They get lonely, they create this social life in wherever they're living, and then they move on and they have to start over again. And it's this sort of endless cycle, and they get frustrated, where we're really lucky that we're never lonely. We do sometimes have to deal with the issue of, if we have a small living space and we're together, and so we have to make a point to give each other personal space and, maybe sometimes rent a larger place than we would have otherwise rent. But those are workable challenges, and we like each other. So that's been good.
Going back to the gay part, we do have people who contact us and say, gosh, I'd be afraid to go to Turkey, or I'd be afraid to go to Vietnam or these other countries where, gay rights aren't protected. And we always encourage people not to let that drive them away from having these really great experiences. And we do what we can with our platform. We connect with the local gay community, and we try and shed a light on whatever the issues are there, and be out as much as possible to make it feel like we're doing something positive with our travels.
Except, I hate to keep contradicting you slightly, but I do think now that Trump has been reelected a second time, we used to feel like if something happened in a homophobic country, the United States government would have our back. And I don't feel that way anymore. So there are now certain countries maybe that we've visited, very conservative, traditional countries, but I wouldn't go back to now, because if something were to go bad, the Trump administration has made it clear that you are on your own. So the equation is shifting. Obviously you have to be mindful of your comfort level.
Yeah, but I think the Trump administration isn't going to care about anybody who's not a Trump supporter.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
Doesn't matter what country you get into trouble in.
Yeah.
And what about your thoughts on how travel is going to be impacted within your own country? I mean, given there's now been travel bans to various countries, are you here? When you go back, and are you hearing are there concerns about the impact on travel to the States?
I mean, we've read lots of articles saying that the number of people coming to the States is falling, and Canadians especially are canceling trips, and they don't want anything to do with it. And we certainly understand that. We don't spend that much time back there, but I will tell you, even my going back to the United States, I look at my social media before I enter the country. I have no reason to think that, immigration is going to stop and look at me. But if for some reason they were going to, I do not want to find out what their reaction would be to seeing some of the things I posted. So if I'm not an American citizen and I'm thinking about coming to the United States, and I've been critical of the government, or I'm just worried about something happening, I don't think it's crazy to have pause about coming into the United States at this point.
And I think we think people are underestimating the impact that this is going to have on world travel in the years ahead, that there will be repercussions and that there will be, we haven't experienced really overt anti-American prejudice outside of Serbia. But I can, if economies start crashing because of a trade war or something, then things become a little more real. So I just think, America is the most powerful country in the world, and it feels like it's imploding in a lot of ways, whether it's becoming fascist or whatever, it's a profound shift in the world order. And that's going to have repercussions, I think, for the rest of, for decades to come. But we don't know exactly what they are, but it's scary. Yeah, it's frightening.
So how long are you planning on doing this? Is this a forever thing?
We get asked that question a lot. And we always tell people, we're going to keep doing it. And we've been doing it 8 years. We're going to keep doing it until either we have grown tired of it, or health issues, or maybe now, as Brent's talking about the world order changing, something external forces it to stop. We always check in and reevaluate how we're feeling about the travel. And we just said to each other this morning, we've been here in San Miguel 2.5 months, which is a fantastic destination. We've absolutely loved it. And yet we both looked at each other and said, when we leave next Wednesday, we're not going to be sorry to go. It's time for us to move on. And that says to me that we're still enjoying the lifestyle. We are not feeling a lot of pressure to settle down. Brent sometimes talks about wanting to have a home base, which a lot of nomads do after time. They'll have a home base they can come back to. But there's all kinds of reasons that we continue to shy away from that. At some point, that pressure will change, and maybe we will decide to get a home base and travel a little bit less frequently.
But honestly, we also say we've kind of become addicted to the novelty. It's terrible to say, but life is always new and exciting. And every time we go for a walk, it's often someplace we've never walked before. Whereas when we lived in Seattle, we made the same, 4 walks over and over again. And we both do sometimes wonder, this is terrible, but somebody said to me once, you never got beyond the honeymoon stage in these different countries that you live in. It's all new and fresh. And I thought, well, that's entirely true. We do meet local friends, and I think we go fairly deep. But on the other hand, honeymoons are awesome. What's so bad about going from honeymoon to honeymoon? Spending your whole life on a honeymoon sounds pretty goddamn good to me. So it's like, but in a way, the dark side to that is I do feel like we've become a bit addicted to the novelty, and that if we stopped, we would feel bored, which is not unnatural. This is so an unnatural state of being. I mean, I guess there've always been like traders and travelers and explorers and pioneers, but I do worry that when it comes time to settle down, whether for health reasons or otherwise, it'll be a challenge, and it might be. But like I said, for the time being, it's awesome. It's a great way, as Monica said.
I want to be in a permanent honeymoon phase. I want that. So what are some of your top tips for other people to do the same thing that you're doing?
I would say the world is not as scary as many people think it is. Don't be fearful of going out there. I would say be flexible. You really have to be adaptable and able to roll with the punches. Do a lot of research into your destinations to figure out what it is that works for you. What kind of travel is going to most appeal to you? What else?
I think don't be afraid of looking ridiculous, because nobody cares. Nobody's watching you. There's this idea that if you, do something stupid, or if you mispronounce a word, people will judge, and nobody cares. I'm 60 years old and I still feel like like a 13-year-old boy, thinking that everybody cares about my business, and nobody does. That's what 8 years of travel has taught me, that you just go with the flow, and people enjoy it when you make a chance and you screw up. Everybody laughs, and it's just nothing to be afraid of. And as Michael said, the world is nothing to be afraid of. Putting yourself in a weird situation, somebody will step up and help you. You'll make a magical connection, or you won't, or you'll be, lost and scared for a little bit. And that's a good thing too. You'll learn a little bit of mettle and resilience. And these are all wonderful things, and you'll be exposed to things that will surprise you, and you have to try to figure them out. And then you realize, oh, wow, people are more alike than they're different. And all these wonderful things will happen with your brain. And it's just, it's so much, all of the cliches about travel are true. They're true, and they're wonderful. And, sometimes bad things will happen, but that can happen anywhere.
I think I'd also add that if you are going to do long-term travel, it's really important to work on your relationships. And I think you both need to keep your connections to your friends and family back home by Zooming or going home to visit once a year, or encouraging your friends and family to come visit you as you travel. And we've had a bit of that happen. But you also need to connect with other travelers, and you have to work to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people talk about end up being really lonely. And I think that can be a danger, especially if you're, if you're moving 1 to every 3 months, you're going to be, getting to know people and leaving them. Once you start doing it for a while, and if you nurture those connections, you will start meeting up with those people again around the world, and you will start to feel like you have a traveling community, so that you don't end up feeling alone and isolated.
But it goes back to what I said about not being afraid, because somebody said to me once, have you ever gotten a message from a friend where they say, I'm just thinking about you, and been annoyed? It's like, that doesn't happen. People always want to hear from you. And if they don't, then that's clarifying too. That's the other thing that this travel has shown us. Who your friends are, who you really care. All of the obligatory friends fall away right away, and you concentrate on the people that you made a real connection with. And it's like, Michael is right. You have to make that a priority. You have to be mindful of all these important things, and all the things that, keeping up with your TV show or commenting on Facebook, all the things that don't matter, they don't matter. And it's more clear they don't matter when the alternative is, well, I can doom scroll on my phone, or I can go into the town square and watch some cool festival and get street food. It becomes very, very clear which is more worthwhile.
Yeah. And I love your advice, Brent, about just getting out and not being worried about what people think, because this is important, a message in life, right? And particularly, like you say, when you're traveling, it opens your eyes and makes you realize that the world's a much better place than worrying about yourself so much and being so insular and self-absorbed. And I think that that's such a wonderful message, and a really important one. Right, we're running out of time, so we're going to wrap up by asking a question we ask all of our interviewees, which is, what's the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to you on your travels?
We tried to come up with a good answer to this. Well, we've had our apartment in Bulgaria caught on fire once.
Our plane caught on fire.
Our plane flying from Boston to London caught on fire, and we had to divert. So we had those incidents.
Oh yeah, somebody pulled a gun on us one. I mean, all these, but that
was in the United States. That was pre-nomading days.
But it's honestly the most bizarre thing. Honestly, when we were in America, it always felt like pulling teeth to get people to get together to socialize. And I don't know if it was us. We were in a different headspace back in America. We were younger, and I think people were caught up in family and career. Or I think that it's much more likely that outside of America, people are much more open to connections and valuing life, appreciating life, living in the moment. And also, I think the travel community is, you don't leave home if you're perfectly content with your life. You leave home if you're trying to get away from something, or you're looking for something. You're searching for something, or you're running away from something. One of those two things. That's why you leave home, because it's a lot of activity. You have to go through a lot of planning. So those people are interesting, and they want to connect with you. And I do think, it is bizarre to me. We're sort of like popular now, but we were never popular back in Seattle. We always would throw dinner parties, and people had excuses. And we thought, is it us? Are we boring? Are we not charming? Now we are popular. And I don't know if that's been the most bizarre thing.
And since this is an Australian podcast, I will just throw in this story. Back in the 80s, when I was backpacking around Australia, I was in New South Wales in a very rural area backpacking with a friend, and we got picked up by a very strange man who had a lot of religious iconography on his dashboard, and he was carrying a copy of a movie called The Hitcher, and he was a very weird man, and he gave off very strange vibes. And as soon as we came to the next intersection out in the middle of nowhere, we got out of the car, and then several years later, I learned a serial killer had started operating about 9 months after that experience in that part of Australia, and he was picking up European and I think Australian backpackers and murdering them in a forest. So that was a really bizarre experience. Whether that was him or not, I cannot tell you. I just know I have never forgotten that experience and how weird that was.
But it's another piece of travel advice. Trust your gut. Your gut is so valuable. And I feel like my gut is more tuned. It's so true that we rarely feel in danger. And when we do, we just get an Uber. Just go home.
Well, I hope your lasting memories of Australia are not there. And
No,
Oh, nice up the hand.
I've lived in Australia for more than 2 years now. We spent 3 months there.
Blue Hills.
The Blue
Oh,
Mountains.
that's Blue Mountains.
Just last year we were there. No, Australia, Italy, Mexico, and Thailand are my favorite countries in the world. One of my few regrets in life is that I didn't immigrate to Australia. Well, it would be a regret, except for meeting Brent. I didn't immigrate to Australia back in the late 80s.
And
I had the opportunity.
He's not just sucking up to you. He's a total fan.
No, I've got Australian friends and family. I follow the Cronulla Sharks. I follow Australian politics. I'm an honorary Australian, whether Australia has me or not.
Too many thorns and bitey things for me, but otherwise it's a beautiful country.
I haven't told about the sharks I've encountered.
I had an encounter with leeches, like dry leeches in Australia, that has left me traumatized for months, for years. But otherwise, a beautiful country.
Oh, look, it's been so wonderful chatting with you both, and I've absolutely loved it, every moment of it. And you've given some incredible advice for people who want to follow in your footsteps. And thank you for sharing your journey. And I hope that we can connect again and see where you are maybe in a year's time.
Absolutely great, Kirsty. Thank you so much for having us.
You can follow Brent and Michael's adventures at brentandmichaelaregoingplaces.com. Next up, I chat to award-winning freelance food, travel and lifestyle journalist Natasha Mirosh, who swapped the sunny shores of Brisbane to move temporarily to a tiny village south of Rome. We chat about why she did it, what there is to see and do in the region, and how you can do it too. Welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you on The World Awakes. We'll just start by tell us a little bit about how you got into the travel industry and what you're doing now.
Look, I was in my 20s and I'd been living in London for about 4 years at that stage. I'd been back to Australia for a couple of months after the typical 2 years, but I just couldn't settle, so I'd come back. I'd always really loved writing, and so I started doing a night course in journalism at a local college in London with the idea of going on eventually to uni to study journalism. And I received a letter from a friend who'd returned home. It was kind of a long essay really about the joy of coming back to Australia after living in Europe for a couple of years. And it was really good. I really enjoyed reading it. And I suggested he turned it into a travel article and that I'd submit it to a travel publication in London that was aimed specifically at Australian travellers. So he did, he wrote it, and I wrote a sort of contrasting version about how difficult I'd found it to settle in. You know, I wasn't ready to go back to Australia at that stage, and there were things that I found really strange. And I sent them both off, faxed them actually at that stage. That shows you how old I am, to the publication. And a couple of weeks later, to my great surprise, I picked up, it was a free publication that you would get from the train stations. And I picked it up and there was my article published in it. Not his, just mine. And a couple of days later, I got a check in the post for £45. And so I was just like, my God, you can make money doing this. So I started doing temporary admin jobs, and between those temping jobs, I would travel and then I'd write about it and submit it to different publications. And I picked up a couple of regular columns in newspapers and magazines. And that was it, really. It was 10 years before I restarted and actually finished that degree and got a staff job on a newspaper. So I kind of did it all backwards to the way most people do it. I started freelancing and then got a staff job rather than the way people do it usually, which is the other way around. So that was it. Absolutely. It is normally the other way around. And here you are still doing it, and highly successfully. And you because it's such a remote role, you're able to do it from anywhere. And so you have to tell us what made you want to pack up and move to Italy. Well, the long version is I've always been drawn to Italy ever since I was a child. It was kind of the first foreign culture that I'd been exposed to because my mother's twin sister had married a Florentine. And every couple of years, she and my uncle and my cousins would come to Australia to visit us. And I just thought they were the most glamorous beings ever. You know, they just came in with this European feel about them and I loved the sound of the language. So when I was 21, I went to Florence to stay with my aunt and my cousins, and I did a month of language school there. And I stayed for a few months doing nannying, and I really, really loved it. Later, though, when I moved to London, I met an Italian who he didn't speak much English at that time. And we got together and we moved in together, and we frequently visited Italy, either seeing his family or mine. After we broke up, after 5 years or so, I came back to Australia, but I still loved Italy and I continued visiting regularly, including in time with my husband, who also fell in love with Italy. Then late last year, one of my brother's old girlfriends from, 30 years ago reconnected with me and we started to hang out a bit. And it turns out that she had married and divorced an Italian and had an apartment in a village in Italy. She doesn't rent it out to people. She only lets people, friends and family stay in it. There are all kind of regulations about if you rent it out to a local person, basically you can never get rid of them. They're there for life. So she doesn't do that. She comes and stays for a couple of months every year, and the rest of the time she just lets people she knows stay here. And she offered it to us, and of course I accepted. My husband was fortunately had quite a lot of long service leave, so he took a couple of months long service leave. And coincidentally, happily, I'm currently doing my master's dissertation on an Italian food subject. So it seemed like everything just came together and it was the perfect time to immerse myself in Italian culture, really.
Amazing. So you didn't have any other responsibilities at home that you had to deal with? Animals and...
No. Sadly, our dog was very elderly, had lived a lovely life, had passed on, and my son has now moved out of home. So we actually got a friend's daughter to come and house sit for us. So she's enjoying that. She's at uni. And so, yeah, we had no reason to not do it.
Oh my gosh, I just cannot wait to get to that stage where my children have moved out of home and I can do it too. So tell us a bit, first of all, about the region of exactly where you are and a bit about what you've been doing and what there is to do there.
Yeah, I'm in Lazio, which is Rome, of course, is the capital of that region. We're living in a very small, very old village it's very historic. It was once enclosed by walls, and there's the remains of a castle at the top. The apartment we're in, it's at the highest point. It's a pedestrian-only area, so you have to leave your car sort of halfway down. Not that we have a car, but yeah, you can't drive here. It's very typical with cobblestone lanes, and it's very pretty, but it's a typical village. People live here. It's not a tourist village. It's very close to the coast. So I'm sitting out on the terrace at the moment and I can look out over the plain and there's a lake in front of us. And beyond that, there is the sea. It's just about an hour by train to both Rome and Naples. So we're between both. So we do day trips there. Rome is a bit crazy at the moment, so as you can imagine. So we've been avoiding that, but we had a great day trip to Naples where we did a food tour recently, which was just fabulous. There's not so much to do in the village itself. It's very quiet, but there are lots of interesting little towns that are just a bus or a train ride away. We went to one the other day full of ancient ruins and, this incredible temple that we just wandered around completely on our own. It's just incredible.
But that's what you want, right? If you were staying, like if I was going to go and stay, I want to find a remote little village where I can sort of integrate with the local culture and just, live like a local. I mean, that's just such a remarkable experience.
That's exactly what it is. And it's, there are negatives to that as well. But, generally, if you want that authentic experience, and I hate the word authentic, but you know what I mean, that's what you need to do rather than staying in those tourist areas. We just spent a long weekend on the most beautiful island called Ponza, which we can actually see from here. It's just off the coast. And it's a place where really only Neapolitan and Roman families go. I mean, we didn't hear any English at all. And in fact, we have not heard any English since we've been here, apart from when we visited Rome, And around the village itself, there are plenty of walks. We've got mountains behind us, and there's one of Europe's last remaining cork forests, which is not very far away. Yeah, and apart from Rome, this region really doesn't get a lot of attention from tourists. So As I said, we haven't met any English speakers at all, really.
Remarkable. So what have you been doing about, how have you been integrating into the local community, and tell us a bit about some of the local people, and have you met the local characters?
We have, and I was very lucky that my friend who owns the apartment has given us a written lowdown of some of the villages. So we were prepared. She pointed out the hierarchy. For example, there's a group of matriarchs here, and we need to be particularly diplomatic with who we speak to and what we tell them, and, what kind of respect we give to which people. You do see the same faces a lot, and we don't know everybody's names, but now they greet us. They've seen us around and they know that we're the Australiani. There's a group of old men who do a walk around the perimeter of the village every afternoon who we usually chat to because we try to do the same. There's the church bells just gone. Then there's Daniela, who owns the only bar in the old town. It's almost just below us, which is very dangerous because they do excellent cornetti, which are like a croissant filled with cream or pistachio cream, which they do for breakfast. I've joined the local library, and I'm on a WhatsApp group of the local fruiterer farmer who sends daily messages and photos of what he's got in fresh, which is very cool. And a couple of days ago on the little community bus, an old guy tried to sell me a bag of chicoria, which is like a bitter herb that he'd foraged in the hills. It was like he was doing a drug deal with me, but I actually can't stand the stuff, so I didn't buy it.
That's hilarious. So tell us a bit about what have been some of the biggest challenges of making this move.
Honestly, it's been pretty easy. The biggest challenge is the stairs. There are just so many stairs here and pretty much anywhere around this area. We don't have a car, so we have to walk down to the plain, to the flat, to the supermarket, or if we want to go to the train station to get anywhere. There is a little community bus that comes up and down, but it's very erratic and seems to have a very long lunch break, like many things in Italy, so you can't always rely on it. The other challenge is that for an introvert like me, we have to make the first move really in creating relationships. So everyone's like super friendly, but especially when they realize that we can speak Italian, but they don't tend to approach us first or ask us questions. So we have to make the first move. And then there's been a couple of lingual difficulties, not too many, but there was a very long and very complex conversation that I had about the rubbish collection, which with the senora who lives downstairs, because the rubbish collection here is very complicated. It's 6 days a week, and on each day is a different type of rubbish. And there is one particular rubbish bin that we didn't realize was only for one specific reason, and it has a barcode. And this is all the rubbish that doesn't go in the recycling. So you've got plastics, you've got glass on one day, you've got metal on another day, paper on another day, and then you've got this one which is called indifferenza, which is everything else that can't be recycled. And it has a barcode on the side, and apparently the rubbish man scans that barcode because you only get a certain number of those collections included, and then you have to pay for them after then. So everybody's very protective over their indifferenza bin, and we were just in the other bin. So that took quite a bit for me to understand.
So unlike at home here, where we just all run out and load up the neighbours' bins whenever on rubbish day, we're running down the street trying to fill up the neighbours' bins, you wouldn't be doing that then. And what have been some of the nicest surprises since you've been there?
Look, I think the biggest surprise has been how easy it's been to adapt. It already feels like home. It's it's so different to the short visits that we've done in the past. And I think part of that is not just the length of time that we're here, but where we are. We're really off the beaten track here. Like most people that I've met outside of the village, if I tell them where we're living, have no idea where it is. Italians I'm talking about. So, it's not a well-known place. So we're really having to really immerse ourselves in the day-to-day life of, Italians without all the helpful pointers that you normally get as a tourist. So it's much more complex to navigate, but a lot more fun.
And if someone was going to visit there, like as a traveller, rather than completely moving there, would you, I mean, and they wanted to stay in somewhere like where you are, which would give them a really true, like I also hate the word authentic, but a really genuine sort of immersion into the local culture. Are there places that you can stay, or would you be hiring a house or doing an Airbnb or something?
I think you'd probably be doing an Airbnb, unless I'm so fortunate to have somebody. But there are lots of little Airbnbs and places in these towns that aren't necessarily on the tourist track, that are not horrendously expensive. So there is plenty of opportunity. But what I would say is that if you're going to do this, that you should hit the Duolingo maybe. I already spoke some Italian, but my husband did Duolingo lessons online for months before we came here. And he says that it's given him such a different experience from our other trips, because people just open up to you so much when you speak their language. When we go up to somebody and introduce ourselves, for example, they immediately smile and they just start talking to us, like we're Italians, and, they're very, very friendly. I think it would be quite difficult to navigate without any Italian, though of course it's much easier these days with Google Translate and other apps like that.
And what are some of the other tips for people who actually did want to do exactly what you're doing, like me? And what would be some tips for what, how do you do it? I mean, if you don't have, like you say, if you don't have, unfortunate enough to know someone to get a house, and just generally, what were some of the things that you wish you'd known before you did it?
Well, I would say that one thing that you can do is to do a house swap with somebody, and often those house swaps tend to be in regions like this. I have a friend who manages the Australian kind of branch of a house swapping association, and she spends months every year in different places swapping houses. And I said to her once, do people want to come and stay in suburban Brisbane? I love my city, but, it's not exactly a touristy kind of place. And she said, yeah, absolutely. So there is always that option to join a reputable house swapping. But there are also lots of groups that you can join, Facebook groups, I absolutely loathe the word expats, but, that can help you find somewhere to stay. Doing a course like I did when I first came to Italy all those years ago is always a good option. There are lots of language courses, and it just gives you that introduction to not just the language, but to meet other people and to make those connections locally, I guess.
And so on a day-to-day basis, I mean, are you going to be doing a lot more sort of trips out, or is it mostly day trips? And what are you both doing on a day-to-day basis?
I'm still working, so I'm writing travel stories. I have some trips planned. So we're going to Austria and we're going to Slovakia. My husband and I worked out that we've been to every region in Italy apart from Calabria. So we are meeting some English friends and going to Calabria in June for a couple of days, which will be fun. We're actually going to hire a car that time and drive down the coast and back up the coast again. On a day-to-day basis, we try to do a couple of day trips every day. So, I'm here to work. I'm working on my dissertation and I'm working on my travel stories. So I put aside a bit of time every day to do that. Sometimes I'll go to the library. Sometimes I'll just sit out on the terrace in the sun and do my work. My husband's been making little excursions by himself. So jumping on the train, like yesterday, he went to Formia, which is a coastal town not far from here. And the rest of the time, we're just kind of living like we would at home, doing our washing and hanging out the laundry and, doing home chores and going to the supermarket and cooking our meals. So,
are you pleased that you made the move? Like, is it something that you think, are you pleased that you did it?
I'm so happy I did it. I mean, it's like sort of going back in time for me to my 20s when I did it the first time. And strangely enough, it was the same period of time that I did it back then in my 20s, the same months. We arrived at a great time because it was it was just before Easter. And they have a very traditional Easter procession here, which was fantastic. We turned up at the church and all of the villagers were dressed up either in ancient Roman gladiator type costumes, soldier costumes, or they were dressed up as, in headscarves and robes, etc., and smoking outside the church while waiting for the procession to come up from the road below along the alleyways and into the church, where they did this big sort of, I guess it's the Passion Play. I'm not Catholic or even vaguely religious, so I'm not really sure. But it was a lot of fun, and all of the villagers seemed to get involved. They were all dressed up. And then yesterday was a May Day holiday here. We've had, what else have we had here? Oh, the village sausage festival was on a week or so after we got here, which was lots of fun. It's a very traditional sausage that they make here with fennel seeds, and then they serve it with this herb that they call broccoli, but it's actually like a wild broccoli leaves, and they stuck it into a crunchy baguette type bun. And so there are all kind of stalls set up and fireworks, and yeah, it was really fun. So we've arrived at such a great time. And of course it's spring, and there are just all around us are just verges with flowers growing wild everywhere. The weather is just perfect. It's been about 18 to 20 every day, blue skies, sunshine. I'm already ridiculously brown just from sitting out on the terrace doing my work, because we don't burn like we do in Australia. So yeah, I'm really very happy that I did it. And in fact, I get a bit of a sinking feeling in my stomach when I think about going home.
Oh, that's so nice. And I can imagine I would feel the same. What an incredible experience. And to be somewhere that is, not too far from main cities, but still so quiet and a little, village where you could really immerse yourself amongst that culture must just be such an incredible experience.
Yeah, look, it really is. And it's interesting that, a lot of these villages are dying out in Italy. Young people are moving away. But this village seems to be particularly dynamic. And I think it's because of this group of matriarchs that, keep it so like this. It's decorated all the time. So they have, at the moment, it's all decorated in spring colors. And there's paper flowers hanging from things all over the alleyways. And people have got buckets of flowers out and paintings on their walls, and then come summer that will change, and then during the Christmas period, again it's all decorated, lights and everything. So they're very dynamic, and it's great to see that there are a few young children in the village as well. There are a lot of old people, and I watch them, some of them with walking sticks, and think, wow, how do you cope with this village with all these stairs, slippery surfaces, etc. But they love it, and they don't want to move anywhere else. And it's a really great vibe living here.
And it's a lot of the reason why, everyone talks about the blue zones. And when we were in Sardinia last year, that they were saying a lot of the reason a lot of these people are living so long and such healthy lives is because, yeah, they're out and about. They have no option but to be. Yeah. So that certainly helped with longevity. Oh, look, it just sounds like a remarkable experience. And yeah, I'm sure that there would be lots of people wanting to follow in your footsteps, and who will be listening, just wishing that it was them that were doing it. So if someone was going to just come and visit, what's one thing to that very area? What's one thing that you think they should definitely make sure they do?
Look, I would say to visit the Pontine Islands. They are very, very undervisited by tourists. I've been twice, and they're just absolutely idyllic, unspoiled. Imagine Capri, but without any of the pretension or prices. And, there are very, very few tourists there. It's just the color of the water, the geology of these volcanic islands, the peace and quiet. Where we were staying, we would be woken up in the morning either by the church bells, or, there's one going right now in our village, or roosters. It's just so peaceful. And, going out on a boat and being able to jump into this water that's just so clear, or swim through caves. It's incredible. So don't miss the Pontine Islands.
Amazing. What great advice. Oh, look, it's been so great chatting with you, and I could talk about it for hours, but we are running out of time. So I'm going to ask you the question that we ask all of our interviewees, our last question, which is, what's the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to you on your travels?
Well, it's not a bizarre experience, but it's certainly a life-changing one. I was on an assignment on a Greek island, and after I finished doing that particular assignment, I decided to extend my stay, and I went and I found somewhere on the beach. It was like this taverna apartments to stay at. The owner's son and I were doing a little bit of heavy flirting while I was there, but nothing happened. And we said goodbye on the day that I was due to leave. And his dad dropped me at the airport, which is a very small military airport that has a flight to Athens once a week. So I sat there waiting for my flight, and then this announcement came saying that because of the weather, the flight was cancelled and basically come back next week. So I had to go back to the village and back to the taverna. I caught a lift with somebody at the airport and turned up again and said, "Here I am. Do you mind if I stay another week?" So I stayed there for another week, and during that week, Theo and I had a romantic liaison, and despite precautions, I got pregnant, and my son is now 25 years old. So that was probably the best souvenir I ever brought back with me on a trip.
I love that. It's been so great chatting with you, and thank you so much for your time. And we will put a link to your Instagram, and people can follow you and watch the amazing things that you were doing.
Thanks for having me.
You can follow Natasha on Instagram at Natasha Mirosh, and we will put a link in the show notes. On our next episode, we're taking you to two stunning bucket list destinations, Songsar Private Island off the mainland of Cambodia and to the Maldives. And if you're enjoying our podcast, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Click on our profile, scroll down to the bottom to leave a star rating. And if you're on Spotify, go to our main page and click the three dots underneath our photo. Or simply drop us a line at hello@theworldawaits.au. We love hearing from our listeners. Thanks for joining us on the World Awaits Summer Series. See you next time.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.